So now we kind of covered the basics about cells and what they mean in biology. Let's get into the nitty-gritty about the different types of cells there are. And we can really break them down into two categories: eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. There are things that both cell types have in common, but also key differences that put them and keep them in different categories. So, what are some of the things that they have in common? One, we use DNA and have DNA inside the cell. Two, we have ribosomes that will serve as little protein factories. And three, we have a plasma membrane in cytoplasm that will give us some sort of structure to hold things together and create a boundary between the inner portion and outer portion of the cell. So we have these commonalities of ribosomes, DNA, and a plasma membrane, but some key differences include eukaryotic cells having organelles that prokaryotic cells do not have, and that eukaryotic cells are much larger, sometimes 10 times bigger or more, whereas prokaryotic cells are very small. They're also different in how they contain the DNA. So while both cells have DNA, eukaryotic cells are going to hold DNA in a special compartment called a nucleus, whereas the prokaryotic cells don't have that. The DNA is just found kind of in the middle of the cytoplasm. There's no real boundary or border or compartment holding the DNA in anywhere. Let's look at the prokaryote first. These guys are a little bit more on the simple side. And when we're talking about prokaryotes, we're usually talking about bacteria and archaea. You might not be familiar with archaea, but you probably have heard of bacteria. Usually we think of them when we think about something getting us sick. Bacteria can get us sick in many cases, but they also can be harmless and sometimes even helpful for us. So prokaryotes are just a category that doesn't necessarily define their harmful nature or not harmful nature for us. But let's look at what all prokaryotes have in common. And some of these we've already mentioned. Like, they all have a plasma membrane. Something needs to provide a barrier or a border between the inside and outside of the cell. And on the inside is where we can find the DNA, the ribosomes, and the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a gel-like fluid. It's not quite water, right? It's more of a thicker jelly-like fluid inside the cell that we can suspend things in and dissolve things in. The DNA in prokaryotes is found in a circular loop, and this is going to code for genetic information. It's going to code for the things that our cell needs to do and make. And then lastly, the ribosomes. These are little bodies made up of RNA and protein that will take the genetic information found in DNA and translate that message into a protein. That's why I call them little protein factories, because they basically read the instructions found in the DNA and then, using those instructions, build a protein that can be used to perform some sort of task inside the cell. Now, some bacteria or some prokaryotes will have some additional structures depending on who they are. They may have something like a cell wall that will help kind of protect and give shape to the cell. They might have a capsule that provides more protection. They may have little pili, which are little hair-like projections that can help them stick to surfaces and sometimes can help them transfer DNA around. And lastly, they can have a flagellum or cilia, which are basically whip-like projections that can help them move around. The eukaryotic cells do have a couple categories depending on which eukaryote we're looking at. But in general, the things they have in common is that they have organelles, those compartmentalized areas that will perform a specific task for that cell. We're looking here at the plant and animal cells. We have the animal cell on the left and the plant cell on the right. Now, we see that both of them are going to have a nucleus where we find DNA, a plasma membrane, ribosomes, mitochondria, a rough ER, a smooth ER, cytoplasm, a cytoskeleton, the Golgi apparatus, and lysosomes, no matter which type or which category of eukaryotic cells we're looking at. Something that's unique to animal cells is a centriole. So animal cells will have a centriole and plant cells will not. Plant cells have some unique characteristics and structures themselves as well, namely the chloroplasts, the cell wall, and sometimes the vacuole, although this can be found in animal cells sometimes. So those are structures that we do not find in animals that we definitely do find in plants. So let's go down the list and talk about what they do. So we look at the capsule. That's a prokaryotic thing for protection. The cell wall, which some of them can have, again, for protection in prokaryotes. It's also to help protect and shape plant cells. The centriole, found in animal cells only, helps with cell division. When we get to mitosis and meiosis, we'll talk more about that. The chloroplast, found only in plants, helps with photosynthesis. This is what's going to allow plants to make their own food. The cytoplasm is found in everyone, and that's just, again, the gel-like fluid we find on the inside. The cytoskeleton we also find in everyone to help provide some structure and support, as well as work with transport. DNA is found in everyone because that serves as our genetic information system. Flagellum can be found in prokaryotes and occasionally found in animals. That provides movement. Namely, when we think of animal cells, we're thinking of things like sperm. The Golgi apparatus is strictly eukaryotic, found in both animals and plants, and it's going to help with processing and packaging molecules. It basically works as an Amazon fulfillment center, where it will take things from other organelles, organize them, process them, package them together, and ship them off to another location. Lysosomes are also animal and plant only, and they contain digestive enzymes. They're kind of like little recycling factories where they can take in materials and break them down back into smaller, more usable components. The mitochondria, which are found in animals and plants as well, also known as the powerhouse of the cell, their main job is to produce what we call ATP. ATP is a molecule that will help basically power different reactions found in the cell and in the body. Without ATP, you're not going to really be able to do anything. So these make what we would call an energy currency, a molecule that stores a lot of energy and will release that energy, which we can then use to power a different chemical reaction. We have the nucleus, found in animals and plants as well, that will serve as a control center and hold on to that DNA. We have the pili, found in prokaryotes only. That's used for them to stick to places as well as move DNA around. The plasma membrane, found for everyone. Again, this serves as a way to separate the inside and outside, to provide a barrier or a border. It's not protective though. It's actually pretty weak, and it's not going to be able to withstand some sort of attack. The ribosomes that are found in everyone, and like I mentioned, little factories to make proteins in. The rough ER, which will take those proteins and modify them, but only in animals and plants. The smooth ER, also only in animals and plants, that will make things like lipids, as well as help detoxify molecules. These can perform special functions for certain types of cells, like calcium storage in muscle cells. And then lastly, the vacuole, which is mainly found in plants, although occasionally found in animals, and serves as a storage facility, mainly for water or nutrients dissolved in water. So let's kind of look at them, comparing the two together. Again, prokaryotic cells are much smaller than eukaryotes, whereas eukaryotic cells are much larger. The prokaryotic cells are generally simple and do not have organelles, no special compartments, whereas eukaryotic cells are complex and do have a lot of different types of compartments on the inside. And so if you think of the prokaryotic cells, they're kind of like a one-room cabin where everything you need is in that one room. Right? You have your kitchen, you have a bathroom, you have a bed, you have all the basic things you need to survive and be comfortable in one single room. Whereas a eukaryotic cell is more like a mansion, where every single room has its own separate and independent function, although everyone contributes to the main house. So you think you have a separate kitchen, you have multiple bedrooms, maybe you have a bowling alley, since we're talking about mansions, right? But every single room is portioned off. Maybe it's only this, person A's bedroom, and then there's person B's bedroom. So think of the rooms like organelles. Moving on, our prokaryotic cells have DNA found in a single circular unit versus the linear DNA found in eukaryotic cells. And this is organized with the help of special proteins that are associated with DNA. And when we look at the organisms that make up the prokaryotic cell groups, we have bacteria and archaea, like we mentioned before. Whereas eukaryotic cells, although we focus on animals and plants, also includes algae, protists, and fungus. If we look at structures that are only found in prokaryotes, we look at things like the capsules and the pili. Eukaryotes have the organelles, including the nucleus, mitochondria, rough and smooth ER, Golgi apparatus, and lysosomes. And then both groups have a plasma membrane, ribosomes, cytoskeleton and cytoplasm, DNA, and in most occasions or some occasions a cell wall.